Lords, ladies and gentlemen, Willie Walsh.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Gerard. It's a great privilege for me to be here this evening. And thank you, Linklaters, for hosting this evening's event. Now, one of the things that the people in this room do not need is a history lesson on Britain and China, and particularly one from an Irishman. But I think the origin of the 48 Club group is something we do need to keep reminding ourselves of. Because the idea that commerce helps to put our political differences into perspective is clearly a cliche, but like most cliches, it's absolutely true. The men and women who founded the 48 Group on both the British and Chinese side knew that. And this group is very much about handing the mantle on to a new generation of business people. Now, obviously, the Anglo-Chinese relationship may no longer need the term icebreaking, and we've heard Lynn say that. But things are always worth reflecting on. And even though the world has changed out of all recognition since this group was founded, I think there is good reason to continue to understand why it was created, what it has achieved, and what can be done in the future. IAG and British Airways have been flying to Beijing since 1980 and to Shanghai since 2004. And indeed, we've just moved to a daily service in Shanghai. We've been flying to Hong Kong since 1936. And we've just recently announced the launch of new direct services from London Heathrow to Chengdu, Sichuan province. And very excited about that, being the first of the new Chinese destinations that we intend to serve following our acquisition of BMI and therefore the slots that it provides us at London Heathrow. We have plans for several other Chinese cities, and I've always seen those links as part of a much bigger mutually beneficial process of deepening our ties between China and indeed China's ties to the world, because connectivity over Heathrow is truly global connectivity. But what makes China attractive to us is probably what makes China unnerving to some in the West. That's its rapid growth and the change that it is bringing. So I want to look at the Anglo-Chinese relationship tonight through the prism of my industry. And I want to make some basic points about the way connectivity is at the heart of China's modern growth, but also to comment on the relationship between Britain and China. Britain grew in the 19th century, not just because it was a great innovator, a great inventor, and a great marketeer of its goods, but by solving its transport problems, even if it didn't recognize that it was doing that at the time. And I think one of the things that strikes me about China today is the extent to which it faces exactly the same challenges, but on a scale about 1,000 times larger than the UK. So how do you plug every part of a vast country into its productivity? How do you shorten the distance and the journey time between Beijing from days to hours? How do you facilitate labor mobility in China? How do you get millions of workers home to celebrate Chinese New Year? How do you connect the big tier 2 cities to the center? And how do you connect all of these booming economies to the clear attraction of the coastal strip? The prize is the opportunity of mobility. And the new Chinese leadership has explicitly set itself the challenge of ensuring that the Chinese economic growth and opportunity reaches every part of Chinese society. The very concept of harmonious development is rooted in the idea that growth and opportunity must be shared. It takes a leap of imagination from both business and government. And in China, that leap is immense. It requires the right mix of government policy and investment and dynamic companies that can work alongside the government to achieve those aims. I have immense admiration for the way China has approached this question. I normally like to quote Irish playwrights and Irish poets, and unfortunately most of my favourite ones haven't witnessed what's gone on in China. But I did find one that I thought was relevant, and that was from George Bernard Shaw, where he said that people who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. And I think that's the story of China. Truly impressive. Every time I leave China, I leave more impressed than when I arrived. And I'm a regular visitor to the country. The 12th five-year plan highlights the strategic importance of aviation in both the passenger and freight sectors. There is a clear focus on the role of hub airports as hubs for regional economies and the role of aviation in multiplying the revenue of non-aviation business. As you probably know, Beijing Capital International Airport is now the second busiest airport in the world. In 2000, it ranked number 42 in the world, with just under 22 million passengers traveling through the airport on an annual basis. It's now more than 4 times that, and will probably become the busiest airport in the world in due course. Airbus predicts that the Chinese domestic market will grow at an average annual growth rate of 7.2% and will become the second largest passenger market in the world by 2030, representing 9.3% of total global passenger travel. There are 177 airports in 175 cities in mainland China, and of those, 21 airports have more than 10 million passengers. Between 2006 and 2011, Chinese airports achieved an amazing compound annual growth rate of 13.3%. And China's ambition doesn't stop there. The aim is not just that China build the infrastructure, but that it reshapes one of the key global industries, the aviation and aerospace industry, and challenges the Boeing-Airbus duopoly on aircraft manufacture. The world will be watching with great interest when the C919, COMAC's answer to the A320 and 737 aircraft, makes its maiden flight towards the end of next year. I'm pleased that at IAG we've had a memorandum of understanding with COMAC going back to 2008, and we believe that we have common interests in ensuring that they develop as a true global competitor with Boeing and Airbus. And in addition, it looks as though China is also focused on aero-engine design to reduce its dependence on the likes of General Electric and Rolls-Royce. Press reports only last week said that Shenyang Liming Aero Engine Group and AVIC Jian Aero Engine Group and the Research Institute at Beijing University are working on developing a high-performance jet engine. That will be a huge challenge, much bigger challenge than developing an aircraft fuselage. The engine challenge, I think, will be significant, but it shows the determination and the ambition that exists in this field. And to support this, China's government has set to approve a 100 billion yuan investment, rising to 300 billion over the next 2 decades to support this goal. Now, that is what I call putting your money where your mouth is. But these planes and runways are the hardware in the bigger picture. The software is the people they carry, and that is where the really transformative effect of mobility comes from. Planes are a delivery system for people, and people mean ideas, experience, money. Before 1974, it was not even possible to visit China as a tourist. Last year, according to a survey published by COMAC, the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China, there were 135 million inbound visitors to China. Foreign inbound visitors by air grew by 4.1% in 2011, and China will probably become the world's biggest tourist destination by the end of this decade. So as well as becoming probably the number 1 economy in the world, the number 1 tourist destination. Until a decade ago, Chinese tourist visas were issued only to a handful of countries. Last year, total outbound international visitors grew by a dramatic 22.4% to more than 70 million customers. And of these, over 64 million were traveling for private purposes. This is a scale of growth that has been unprecedented. The tourism industry here in Europe is waking up to the new world of the Chinese traveller and the Chinese customer. And in the great debate around the trade deficit and what Europe sells to China, we need to remember that one of the biggest things we are going to sell is Europe itself. As a cultural and natural destination, and frankly, as a place for Chinese tourists to do their shopping, you should be welcome to come here in London. Somewhere between 4 and 5 million visited Europe in 2012, especially France and Germany. Now, if we assume that each of those travellers spends on average, say, 2,000 euros in Europe, that's a 10 billion euro spend last year. That's probably about 7% of the EU 2012 trade deficit with China and goods. And that number is just a fraction of what it's going to be a decade from now. And that travel is not just important in itself, but also for how it exposes us to one another. This is a room full of business people. Would anybody here invest large sums of money in a factory or a business in a country that they have never visited? Of course not. The thing about air travel is not just that it means trade, it creates trade just by doing what it does. So one of our biggest challenges in the years ahead is opening and nurturing the scope for this benefit on both sides. The fact that the UK is outside of the Schengen area already creates an additional obstacle for Chinese tourists wishing to travel here, and is probably one of the main reasons why the bulk of Chinese tourism goes to Germany and France and Italy. The UK must make it easier to travel here because we are missing out on a fantastic opportunity. One of the other issues that we need to resolve directly impacting on the airline industry is the attempt by the EU to expand its emissions trading scheme. Now, I've long been a proponent of emissions trading as the most effective way for the airline industry to address its environmental impact. But I have been critical of the Commission's crude attempt to export its solution to the rest of the world. I favour a global framework for aviation emissions. And I'm glad that Europe has taken the opportunity to stop the clock and to allow the global body, ICAO, an opportunity to deal with this issue on a truly global basis. I think it would be totally counterproductive to revert later this year and implement the EU policy while not giving the right opportunity to address this and risk retaliation, because it's that uncertainty and disruption that's damaging to all of our businesses. We need dialogue, not defined by the threat of retaliation, but driven by a common purpose, which I believe exists. We all want to see our environment improved. We all want to take measures to improve the environmental performance, not just of our industry, but of all industries, so that we can guarantee our children and our grandchildren a safe place in which to live. Last year, EU-China summit set out the need for a more strategic dialogue on aviation, and I think it's time to take that seriously. We need to set the ultimate goal of an EU-China open skies agreement with all of the promise that total open access and competition that it would bring. It seems to me that everybody here would or should share in that aim. Nothing breaks the ice and keeps it broken like trade for mutual benefit. If we are interested in deepening the ties, building the shared business interest, breaking the ice, that is what we should be aiming for. With Europe, my sense is that the UK should be more open and less defensive in many respects on China. London could provide an important balancing voice on attitudes to China and Chinese competition in Europe. And the Anglo-Chinese relationship could be nurtured to ensure that we all benefit from this. I don't believe Europe has anything to fear. I don't believe the UK has anything to fear. I think we have fantastic opportunities in front of us. And I believe we should seize this opportunity. For the one thing that is sure about China is that China represents growth and opportunities that we should not hold back on. I'm an optimist by heart. I think the opportunities that exist between us are truly mind-blowing. I think the advances that we've seen in recent times, the strengthening of the relationship, the positive attitude that exists in business towards China and between China and the UK is something that politicians could and should build on. And I look forward to an exciting future in terms of trade, social links, cultural links between the UK and China. Thank you very much.